Good morning. My name is Siva. I look after the solution consulting and digital strategy group for Adobe across Asia Pacific, based in Singapore. And my job today is just to introduce and kick things off for you this morning. To start with, we've got a discussion between Erik from Isobar and Nandor Locher from Qantas. So Erik is it's a bit of a hero in that he started as a really technical developer type guy, been with the company for many, many years, built the company here from 60 people to 300. His profile actually says no bullshit, or infamously no bullshit in there, so you should see such words in people's profiles these days. But he done a fantastic job and a fantastic partner with Adobe in the work that they're doing. Some of our most successful projects and sort of the part of their group has been Partner of the Year many times. So fantastic partnership with Erik and his team. Nandor and I met 9 years ago when I used to work for a different company and Nandor used to work for a different company. But since then he's been at Qantas for 5 years. 5 years, starting with Jetstar, and today he's responsible for the entire experience from sales to service. So everything that you touch in your Qantas experience is thanks to Nandor, maybe Nandor's fault at the moment sometimes. But he's working, and the work that they're doing is pretty transformational, and I think hopefully inspirational to the rest of the industry, not just in Australia, but beyond as well. So without any further ado, let's kick off a discussion between Erik and Nandor. Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone, thanks for joining. So as advertised, my name is Erik and I'm the Managing Director of Isobar. I'll let Nandor introduce himself a little bit later, but what we're aimed to do today is to look at transformation as a concept, which is, it's quite a big word, it's probably a little bit overused as well in our industry as a whole, and take everyone through a journey of applying transformation through the lens of creating better experiences. Today we have 4 distinct sessions that or 4 distinct areas we're going to cover. The context, which is more around the market, the reasons for change, and why Qantas as an organization needed to affect and drive a certain amount of change through the organization. Into the more how, so there's theory and there's a lot of complexity around the topic, but the how of implementing an organizational-wide change is obviously the meat on the bone, so we're going to spend some time there. We're going to discuss around early signs of success, progress, and understanding where this is leading, and obviously knowing that we're on the right track, and then ultimately finish on a few quick little lessons of here's a couple of things that clearly didn't work, here's a few things that worked out quite well. And so going into really the context, this is the journey that had been to a certain point in time where Qantas probably found themselves knowing there are maybe a few things that will have to change. And I'll hand it over to Nandor. Take us through that.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for your interest in joining us this morning. Thanks for the introduction, Siva. So again, I've been with Qantas Airlines for a year before with Jetstar. It's been a great journey. I've been in aviation for 15 years and the better part of that in digital. So we've, like many of you here, have seen the evolution of digital and digital transformation, which quite truly is becoming a buzzword. So before we get into the details, I just want to give you a bit of an overview of Qantas. I don't think I have to introduce the brand. I think most of you will be very familiar with that. Obviously, it's a very large organization. It's a group of businesses, including Qantas Domestic, International, Qantas Loyalty, and also Jetstar is part of the group. So it's a very diverse business, has a lot of diversification happening, particularly in the loyalty business. Give a bit of an idea of size and scale. We operate about 130 aircraft, fly about 35 million passengers a year to 85 destinations. 30,000 employees, largely obviously based in Australia, but around the world. So we're sort of a mid-sized carrier and on a global scale, but certainly punching above our weight, if I would say, when it comes to the experience and to the product we deliver to our customers in Australia and worldwide. From a digital point of view, so the team that I'm heading up is looking obviously at our digital touch points along the customer journey, obviously mainly Qantas.com and our apps being the key assets, but we're really thinking about digital now along the customer journey across the different touch points where we have technology-enabled experiences, customer-facing, and that's the part that I look after. We work very closely with various stakeholders in the business, in particular IT, so we have got a very close and symbiotic relationship. We actually think about this as one team these days, but we're also very closely linked into obviously marketing organizations, sales, loyalty, product, revenue management, and so on and so forth. Part of the context that I found when I joined 12 months ago was great foundation, great brand, great technology, great people, but there was still a range of challenges that we are trying to address to really go from good to great to world class. The digital teams had a degree of fragmentation and distribution across the organization. There was a degree of inconsistency, partially limited collaboration and communication between teams, duplication, inefficiencies, the usual stuff that you find in big organizations. And it's not a fault of any in particular, it's just it is the nature and the result of evolution and how digital has come about and how this capability has evolved within large corporations, which is quite different than when you're a pure play digital player or a smaller organization. Again, giving a bit of size and scale around digital, so we operate a large ecosystem across the group. We turn around about $3 billion online revenue, which is accounting for about 30% of Qantas Airlines revenue, which is a substantial size. It's the biggest travel site in Australia. The combined teams between digital and IT is about 300 people strong. That includes some of our partners, mainly co-located in Mascot in Sydney. And these days we have about 60% of our traffic coming from mobile devices. So talking about experience-led design, that's a very core component of it. Right, so before going further, I just want to give you a bit of context in the environment we operate in, and we really think about 4 macro trends that really influence and drive our thinking. And you will be very familiar with this. There's no news, so I'm going to go through quite quickly. So the emergence and the advances in technology that now infiltrate and impact every sphere of life, no question, is a big driver. 2, our customers really changing their expectations, not just in our industry, across all industries. And what was good enough yesterday isn't good enough today. We are now being compared with the best-in-class organizations, not just in aviation, not just in travel, but in all industries on a global scale. And people just expect that to happen from a brand like Qantas. Next, our competition continues to get stronger and change as well. The environment changes, so we're not just competing with other airlines across the globe or in Australia, but also online travel agents, aggregators, and also the emergence of big tech companies who are friend and foe in a way, thinking about the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons that are really entering the travel market and taking a lot of the customer relationship. And last but not least is the change of customer behaviors when it comes to travel, the way they book, the way they travel, the way they choose their channels, and that's driving a massive shift in the channels, obviously drifting away from desktop into mobile and emerging channels, messaging, conversational interfaces. So those 4 macro trends are not just impacting us, I guess they're relevant for most of you. So if you think about the context, what is the case for change? What are we really solving for with this transformation? We're going to get into it a bit more in detail, what we really mean with that. These are some of the key drivers for us and success factors that we're going to measure ourselves on. First of all, the new currency that we all deal with is speed to market, speed to value. As I said, when I joined the organization, it felt like all the foundations are there. We've got great technology data. We are throwing a lot of investment into digital, but which always felt we're still just catching up. We're just getting to the point where we are catching up with the best in class. So how do we really accelerate? How do we really unlock that extra discretionary component that allows us to become a true leader? Value creation, how do we unlock value? How do we make this a process that is based on not just company value, but customer value, and also value for our people, and having a very different mindset to then how we unlock that. Third one, obviously to achieve speed and value, efficiency, more so than effectiveness, the other way around, effectiveness rather than efficiency is a key component. So how do we accelerate? How do we do more with what we've got? Agility, this is not just about agile methods, this is really about business agility, this is about the DNA of an organization that is embedded in the culture. How do we react to changing customer situations, can pivot in a short period of time and accommodate those changes that come towards us. We want to make digital a really competitive advantage. and sustainable competitive advantage for the organization, we've realized that part of the experience, we really have a hard product, which we all know, planes and leather seats and lounges. We have a soft product, the service, and digital has really become part of that product set, and it's a key differentiator going forward. Innovation, as much as we have a lot of innovations going live and have been for many years, and I think the brain stands for innovation, it still hasn't been at that level where we thought it is sufficient to keep pace. And that was a question of having the right abilities, but also the capabilities within the organization. The team felt often like order takers, work was thrown across the fence, rather than teams can work from within and really drive innovation with customer outcomes. We weren't a great internal business partner, so we were quite focused on our own KPIs, which was largely around selling, very commercial focus, and we really had to shift this and create a horizontal organization enabling the customer strategy and the customer experience across all touch points. And last but not least, we're all in the market for talent. It's one of our biggest challenges. I'm sure you experience the same. And we need to position ourselves as a digital employer of choice and really make sure that we create an environment, the culture, the tools, the platforms that attracts people, attracts talent, and keeps them with us. So digital transformation, going back to your point here around the big buzzword, and these are overused, but it's still very relevant. And in the context of today's presentation, I want to focus on one of those three dimensions. So if you think about digital transformation at Qantas, we divide it into three aspects. First and foremost, it's certainly around the transformation of the digital experience, which is about the customer, along the customer journey, the various touch points. It is the what, and that is the most important part. That's ultimately what matters. That is ultimately what creates outcomes. If you would have asked me a few years ago, what is your transformation happening, I would have mainly talked about that. The next one I would have talked about is technology, digital technologies is the third point here. So the enabling factors, the re-platformings of the world, and players like Adobe and others play a critical role in that, having the right underlying technologies and data structures. But really what I've come to the realization too, and the team is, in order to really unlock the experience part, to really take a step change in that space, we need to do a step change in the way we operate, the way we work, the way we collaborate, the way we engage, and that is a sustainable advantage, and the rest is almost a consequence of that. So we've been really doubling down internally on the second part, and the digital operating model and the ways of working to create amazing experiences, and that's probably going to be the core of today's conversation.
So, Nandor, on that, right? So the enablers is obviously a crucial part of the operations. The customer experience is obviously the value that's generated. But with an organization that has the complexity and scale of Qantas, and also sort of diversification of different areas of ownership, that is a pretty big task. And we've been on this adventure now for close to a year. What would you see as the most important aspects of how you started this journey, in terms of, if you're going to go to a CEO or a board and outline a narrative of, here is the benefit that we want to achieve. We also need some money to achieve that. And unlocking that funding from an organization, again, as complex as Qantas, how did you approach that concept to unlock that funding to begin with?
Yeah, good question. Well, first of all, and I'll start with this slide, I think it's very important to have a very bold vision. Again, I'm not telling you any news, but it is at the very heart of that. Unless we set the bar really high, it is very hard to create that motivation and that momentum. I'm almost calling it the movement that you need to create within an organization, where people at all levels start buying into it and sense the excitement around that. But then becoming a bit more concrete about that, it's really around creating a holistic transformation program. So, of course, there are many elements that you can do in order to get on the journey, but we decided to look at this in a holistic sense, and it isn't just about organizational structures, it isn't just about agile ways of working, it isn't just about technology and tools, it's really all aspects that come together that need to work in harmony and in synchronization in order to achieve the outcome. So that includes the change of the culture, and it's probably the hardest part straight up front. It includes the way leadership is being considered and the guiding principles for that, the decision-making process in it, the empowerment of the different teams. How do we prioritize and fund work? Very critical, and I'll talk about this a bit later on how we did this from the business case point of view. Obviously, structural components, so how our teams organize, we'll touch on this a bit later. How do we measure our performance? How do we hold ourselves to account? How do we really ensure we're creating value? Training, mentoring, uplifting of skills is a key core part, and technology and tools. And that's where partners like Adobe are also really critical in this place, because we need to give our team members tools that allows them to be enabled and empowered to create great experiences. We did create a program of work around this, so we set this up about 12 months ago. We called the program quite fancily Imagine. So if you remember the first slide, that is really dreaming up the future. We have put in place a dedicated program team, and that's where Isobar came on board and providing support, have given us great support, particularly around the ways of working and the non-structural aspects of the transformation. And it's been a great success story so far. We're 2/3 through the program, so we're not done yet. It's been 12 months. I thought we would be here by this stage 12 months ago, but these things take time, and we'll talk a little bit about this later as one of the lessons. And it'll probably take us another 6 to 12 months to truly embed these new ways of working, this massive change at a scale that we've got in place. So touching on the business case, and back to your question, about 12 months ago we floated the business case at a broad level, and back to your question on what made this a success. I mean, there's as usual business case stuff, but a few things that stand out that I want to touch on. I think one key factor for us was a broader organisational change where the organisation pivoted from a structural point of view and put a new program of work in place around the customer, which is called Target CX. A chief customer officer was appointed, and the digital team was moved from the sales and distribution organisation into the customer organisation, which was a fundamental shift in the thinking and really positioning digital in a great way to enable the customer strategy. And to align our story and our narrative with the customer narrative was a real unlocking moment and penny drop moment for a lot of people that had to approve that. Number two was a key enabler, and probably one of the hardest parts is to move away from a project funding model to a capacity funded model. Capacity funded model in order to establish persistent teams. Up until now, teams, as much as the size of the team hasn't changed, but every single person on the floor was funded by a project one way or another, and people came and went and were funded for different parts of the business, and whoever had a check in hand had a say. Right, and the check was defining rather than the value of the outcome was deciding, and putting that in place and saying, like, look, we need to commit to a significant investment. We need to be brave and put this in place. It's not a blank check. We will be making sure that we deliver value, but to get that over the line was really unlocking the journey, and it's really, really important to have that conversation with finance, with your CFOs, and create that. And the unlocking value, of course, that's the one-on-one for every business case. You do need to have a return on the investment. It can't just be a good story. And we worked very hard in focusing not just on the cost, but really what do we unlock in terms of tangible benefits around revenue, commercials, but also at the customer experience and as well as our people end. So we keep coming back to the business, the customer, and our people, and all those elements are really finding themselves in that part. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Many of you are familiar with this. So our vision was to establish an organizational structure that is setting up customer-centric, cross-functional, empowered, and autonomous teams, which we divide into domains and squads. So you might be familiar with this terminology. Our aspiration was to create a future where people have the ability to design the ways of work, and that gets the best out of the talents and creates the best results. Our domains and our squads are aligned with the customer journey, and that goes really back to the point around experience-led transformation. So the primary dimension of thinking is now the customer journey, the moment in a customer's journey. So each squad is taking care and is end-to-end around certain digital products within a moment. So the 4 domains we set up is to consider, purchase, travel, and relationship across platforms, across the different products we may sell or service. And that has really changed the thinking, because before we were thinking either in lines of businesses, in departments, or in platforms. Oh, this is the website team, or this is the mobile team. And we're really flicking this around, which is quite fundamental. Obviously, we also introduced chapters and guilds for those that are familiar with that, but they're really creating horizontal integration around capabilities to tie together roles and skills of a similar nature. Ways of working is a key part besides the organizational part. Again, that's where the support from Isobar was very critical. We put a lot of effort and time into creating a very comprehensive, set of guidelines. And we don't want to call it a cookbook or a recipe or a Bible as such. It is really a guideline that gives teams empowers them to define their own ways and evolve from there. And that's a key deliverable of the process. And we didn't want to put people into new teams and into new structures without giving them also very clear guidance on how they need to operate in this new world and give them the tools and the training. There's a couple of guiding principles in there that you see on the slide here. Certainly in the center of that is the very core of, innovation or customer-centric prioritization. It needs to be a product that is desirable, that is viable, and is feasible. And that is really leading to us to thinking about how do we prioritize and create value. There's four major objectives or guidelines that we're following. One is certainly agility, and we talked about that, but it's more the mindset of agility rather than the process of agile. Secondly, human-centered design, so really design thinking. Every person off the floor needs to start with that in mind, with the customer problem, with the customer pain point in mind, and not with the business objective in mind. And that is really a massive cultural shift in the thinking. Obviously, technical expertise continues to be critical. We're heavily involved with the technology teams. And then really moving an enterprise like Qantas to a startup type thinking, which is not easy at this size and scale.
So through a program of work like this, which is obviously comprehensive, quite massive, big team and big organization, we thought we'd deep dive quite a little bit into three specific areas that have been, either unusually complex or just a large problem. And culture is certainly one of them. So, all organizations should stand on the shoulders of a fantastic culture. And a culture that retains people, that engages people, and make them happy and make them want to be effective and drive value. But going through effectively telling everyone that the organization that you worked for is going to go through a fundamental change can be quite risky in the sense of maintaining culture, or alternatively, if you're looking to do that, drive a different culture. If you go to the next slide, there's two types of problems that we speak about in this space. There's clock problems and cloud problems. Now, clock problems, they're tactical. They have known outcomes. They're quite linear. So, for example, implementing a CRM system. While there is a lot of complexity in that, it's quite linear. The outcomes are quite known, and you know the impact that certain decisions will have. A cloud problem, on the other hand, is a bit more amorphous. You do something over here, and it changes something over there. Culture is one of those issues, one of those problems. What it means is that active effort in investing into culture in some areas can sometimes have unintended consequences in other areas of the business unless it's all aligned and planned for. And that is really one of the core aspects of this. And some of the key challenges there is obviously leadership. Leadership needs to be a beacon through all of this and model behavior and set a certain posture through a transformation. Going through a series of transformation like this will take time. There will be an element of ambiguity fatigue. So people will be kind of a little bit tired of the fact that things have been changing now for the past 12 months. And managing that ambiguity fatigue also becomes quite important. And then also lastly, the sort of lack of understanding of the scope of the challenge and the why behind it can potentially be damaging to culture. And what I mean by that is if you're not aware what the reasons are behind it, then it's very hard to accept that you are going to go through it as a practitioner. And the way that we've approached it here with Qantas is through what's called a human-centered design approach to change. It starts in 4 tiers. So first off is the organizational belief. So this is everyone at Qantas buying into the vision, understanding the structure, understanding the governance of that structure, and understanding as a whole what the organization is moving towards. The second part is the team belief, which is much more about ways of working. So methodology, process, the security in teams and squads like Nandor outlined, and understanding what that will do to you as a practitioner and the benefit that will create for you as a team. Third to that is the professional belief. So clearly articulating for all staff members how this will make you a better practitioner, which is about mastery, right? So making everyone aware that this change is beneficial for your career. because that is a motivation by itself to be a better practitioner. And then lastly, which is often overlooked, is the self-belief. This is about purpose, about fulfillment, and really being aligned as a human being and understanding that this change will create an environment that will give you fulfillment in your professional career. So aligning all of these 4 aspects of culture change becomes a very structured way of thinking about driving a culture forward. But alignment is one of those challenges that is infamously hard as well, which is the next part of that.
Yeah, so our vision definitely is to create a culture of high alignment and high autonomy. And you might be familiar with this concept from the Spotify model, which you see on the bottom left. And there's many ways to get to that. But it's critical to understand that a new way of working with high autonomy without the alignment is not going to create the desired outcomes. It's actually just replacing all problems with new ones. And it can get quite messy. So throughout the process of our transformation, as much as we were about creating autonomy, we also realized we need to do the same amount of investment on creating alignment. So that really triggered an end-to-end review of our vision, our strategy framework that led it up into the customer strategy and the corporate strategy, but also cascaded down all the way down into domains and product teams. And that's something that our team members haven't done before, to really co-create and collaborate on that. And that's a fundamental aspect of creating that autonomy. So we're choosing the way from the bottom left to the right over the top left corner. Another key part that I will mention as part of culture is the collaboration, another overused word, a buzzword that we all pay, or many pay lip service to. But really there's a big difference between true collaboration and working together. Right, and I think in order for us to make this work in an organisation like Qantas, we really had to break down the silos. We are out there building trusted relationships, sharing successes, sharing failures, being overtly transparent, being engaging early, and really overdoing it, because otherwise we can't achieve that culture of inclusiveness and collaboration.
So, as mentioned, one of the challenges obviously becomes leadership. And there's this classic problem of you have leaders within the organization who are subject matter experts. They might have spent 10 years mastering their craft. And they're experienced people managers as well. So an easy assumption will be, of course, they'll be able to go through a transformation. Of course, they'll be able to do change management. But I suppose that the leadership aspect is important in the sense that leaders need to model this behavior. And so investment into the leadership, I think, has been a core focus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the key pillars of the transformation. And starting off, just following on from you, and some of the challenges that we're facing with that is certainly, first and foremost, capacity. The leadership teams that we've got in place, they often run the ship. They are stretched as it is. They've got big portfolios, and all of a sudden they need to run a transformation in the context of co-creation and input. And the prioritization between BAU, delivery, and transformation was a real challenge for the team. And there is no silver bullet to it. One part certainly was to establish a dedicated program team and actually seek support from external, which helped. But 2 is also really giving your leaders the freedom to prioritize the transformation. And I was very clear with the teams, look, we may need to manage expectations in the business, but right now we really need to double down on the transformation. Otherwise, this is not going to fly. Otherwise, we're going to be in change land forever and now. And giving that freedom to leadership is important. Capability and skills, as you said, many of them grew up in delivering digital experiences, delivering products coming out of technology. People in change management may not have been part of that. Thought leadership, really we wanted to co-create what we're designing, and people shouldn't come just on a jolly ride and take on board what somebody else has thought of, but really put their own thoughts, their own vision and their own ambition into that, and that's quite a big part. And then the cultural change, we talked about culture, but it starts with leadership. Some of the team members we've got, as great as they are, have been in the organisation for 25 years, lifetime Qantas careers is not an unusual thing. Originally a very hierarchical company, very much task-orientated, very much coming out of the origin of operations and safety and flying planes, and it's a very different world than agile digital. So what do we model our leadership principles on? There's obviously a lot of context to that. We spent a lot of time in the beginning of the program to really take a step back and define those principles. What are the values? What are the behaviors that you want to demonstrate as a leadership team? What is the social contract between us? How do we want to be seen? There's 3 topics that I'd like to highlight quickly here that we think is particularly important. One is the concept of the servant leadership, which you probably will be familiar with, which is really that leaders serve the team and not the other way around. And the job of a leader is to remove any barrier for the team to be successful and take a step back and let them do the running. Alignment of vision, again, we're coming back to that. It's very important that the entire leadership team sings off the same hymn sheet, that we are standing behind our vision, that we're cohesive and consistent in our messaging, that we don't undermine it in any way, because that is, if not, it's a key failure already. And then the last one, to create an environment of psychological safety. Again, very unusual in a hierarchical organization. How do we create an environment where people feel safe to do things wrong, ask questions, saying, I don't know, I will come back to you, where failing is okay, and it's almost encouraged.
So that was my alarm went off in my pocket there, Nandor, which means we have to go a little bit quicker, I think. Another key area of complexity becomes scale. So implementing an organizational restructure with regards to ways of working and structure and operating model and all those things, if you're 20 people, you could probably get through that in a few months and deliver benefit shortly after that. But I suppose, given, again, honing back to some of the complexity within Qantas, how would you say it was managed as almost a problem of its own, scale of its own? Because it becomes a beast by itself.
Yeah, it is. And if you think about the elements that are part of the transformation, each element is definitely a manageable challenge, surmountable obstacle, but it's the combination of all of those, the holistic transformation, and then you multiply that into an organization like Qantas. That's where really the complexity comes in. So it's very different either in a smaller business or a pure play. So how do we overcome that? We did like the general advice is we had to start small. So we did test and learn. 2 years ago, we set up an exemplar squad and started experimenting on how that worked. But we realized in order to get scale, we really need to do this at a degree of pace and do it with some commitment to get to the end point, because otherwise you end up in this never-ending change where different parts of the business are in the old world and others are in the new world. So as much as test and learn start small, it's equally important to scale at pace. Having said that, pace is a fluid term in this case. It really takes time to implement this. 12 months ago, I didn't think that I'm going to be standing here 12 months later and we're still doing this. And I had to realize, and we had to recalibrate our expectations throughout the program several times. But we realized it's the right thing to do. This is not the time to rush it, but being consistent, being resilient, and really moving through with it.
So again, then getting towards the tail end of this presentation, with regards to when you're through a 12-month journey and everyone is working quite hard and trying to achieve the benefit for the organization and for the staff members, it's obviously good to see some early signs of success. And so how do you feel, what can you see and what have you observed within Qantas with regards to some benefit that come out of this?
Yeah, it's a great point, and we do definitely start seeing that. I think there's still a long way to go into really realizing the benefits we set out to achieve. But we definitely start seeing a much greater collaboration across the teams, which I was talking about before. It's fantastic. Stakeholders are coming into our environment. We're going out into theirs, which is great. The speed to market is starting to increase through more frequent releases and iterations. Again, we still got a long way to go, but we start seeing the pace picking up and people really being keen about that speed is really something that they're driven by. Also, the prioritization, the conversation is changing to a value-based conversation rather than a business-driven conversation. Again, back to the context with who has got the money will define the priority. Increased sense of accountability in the leadership ranks, but all the way into the teams. For those that really buy into this, they're really excited about this, that they get more ownership of what they do and have a sense of accountability to create a great product. And then the last part is really important back to the experience component, that people really start thinking about solving customer problems, not business problems, and putting the customer in the context, in the center of their consideration. And again, this is all a journey. It's fluid. It's going to take us some time, but this is really great to see, and it's great to play this back to the broader business. And it is creating a movement across the organization.
So depending on where different organizations are throughout their own journey, capturing this last 12 months into sort of a couple of here are good things and here's some not so good things. Do you want to take us through those?
Yeah, here's the preaching part, right? No, look, there's a couple of takeaways, and I think I've touched on all of those. I'm going to go through them quite quickly. Invest in the how to really unlock to what. I think that was my big penny drop moment in the last 12 months. It's critical. Seek a holistic transformation. Don't confuse transformation just with new technologies or platforms or new organizational structure or just agile. Champion autonomy, and that is a really hard part. It's a big part of the cultural change of the servant leadership. Really overdo it, really empower your people. And align everything. Don't forget to make sure that you have got a very clear North Star and you make it clear every day to your team members why we're doing this and what's in it for our customers, but also for them. On the flip side, the things you may want to avoid, as I said, don't mistake technology for transformation. It is a core part, it's critical. We are at the Adobe conference, don't get me wrong. Very important, but it is about people. We are in the people business, and that's really important to understand. Don't rush it, take your time, be pragmatic about it, but keep moving along. Don't forget your leaders, take them on the journey. They're your biggest asset. They will make it work for you, but they need to buy into it. They need to feel accountable. They need to co-create it. And last but not least, don't be a lone wolf. Seek internal support, seek external support, create alliances, create critical mass, create the movement that will help you achieve your goals. So with that, we have a few minutes over. I hope we could leave you with a few insights and learnings. Thanks very much.
So with that, we're going to take some of these learnings and invite up Adam Spencer to the stage. He's going to facilitate this content against different perspectives from different businesses. So I'll leave the stage, but Nandor will stay on the stage because he's a star. And I will invite up philanthropist and model Adam Spencer.
Thank you very much, Erik. You can stay.
Well done.
Okay.
Thanks,
What does experience mean for you and your business? Let's start with the university perspective. Jenna Angelo first. Experience. What do you mean when you talk, Jen, about experience?
Well, I guess for us at Charles Sturt University, experience is everything we do from the moment somebody comes to career day to they see one of our ads, all the way down to a fairly new concept in the Australian market is our alumni. It is knowing our customers, it is ensuring we understand their drivers of choice, is ensuring that we align what we do with the customer lifecycle or the customer journey, and that we really understand at which point what content we're delivering, and that goes all the way from your advertising, but also in the course space. So it's woe to go for us, it's everything we do.
I can remember enrolling at the University of Sydney, standing there in a queue of people about to go round the Great Hall, filling out bits of paper at various desks to enrol in a course. These days, students, if the lectures are not provided online 2 weeks before the lecture, start freaking out. The game has changed totally in this space, hasn't it, Angela?
Absolutely. Well, Sydney's being on brand there. I mean, that's the core of their brand, to make people line up. And that's good for us. Absolutely, experience is everything we do. Universities are built on experience and content and stories. Similar to Jen, we use a moment of truth perspective on it and defining the moments of truth across that life cycle, starting from kids who are in year 5 and 6, actually. That's where we start our engagement because that's how long the journey takes in many respects. But more importantly, the experience benchmark for us isn't Charles Sturt University or the University of Sydney, because generally higher ed doesn't do it well. We benchmark against brands that do it fantastically well, whether it's in financial services or tourism, whatever it is, we try to benchmark at that level because they're the experiences that our students are bringing to us when they're visiting our site and our systems.
David, when do you first make contact with a customer?
First, I'd just like to acknowledge that I've had a promotion, so I'm not the managing director, but I like that experience.
You never know, mate. If you really nail this session,
this could be it. So, look, for BUPA, we're very well known as a health insurance business. We're actually a health and care company, and so our experience actually spans from birth through to death. So we've got aged care. and obviously, health insurance covers pregnancy and birth as well. Our view on experience is that it covers any interaction from a person with our brand in any form, whether it's with someone from an aged care home or a digital experience. And I think probably the most important thing from an experience perspective is that every interaction that you have creates an impression, and sometimes those impressions can last a few seconds, but sometimes those impressions can last a lifetime. And that's why experience is so important, both to people but also to businesses.
Nandor, when is it with you? Is it still most of the time when someone takes their first Qantas flight? I know when my two daughters, we first travelled and they got their little frequent flyer number and first saw a few points in the account. Is that normally still your first customer touch point with someone?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, obviously, we've got a very defined customer journey. It's very tangible to travel from, again, your inspiration stage when you dream up your holiday or you have a business trip coming up, all the way through physical and digital. But we try to go beyond the point of just the transaction of the trip and really start creating experiences across the life cycle of a customer. And that's where your frequent flyer or your loyalty programs come in that go beyond travel. That may include other parts of the product set that we include. As I mentioned before, for us, it's quite aligned with you. It's a combination of all elements that drive an experience, physical, service and digital experience. And I don't think we need to think about the digital experience in isolation. It is embedded in the broader customer experience. And back to your point, I actually ask my kids, because I keep talking about experiences at home, I said, Dad, what is it? And so I ask, how do you define experience? It's very much what you said. They're like, it's the stuff I remember. Like a holiday. They remember that. And I think that's a really nice way of putting it. And I think it's creating memorable moments. And in order to do that, you need to have your basics right, but also you need to have your surprise and delight factors.
Yeah, and I think you are right that it is more than just customer service to make a great customer experience. Maybe Jenna Angelo, in the university sector in particular, what other factors contribute to a memorable experience of the brand or the experience?
I think graduation at university is one of those key points where you really get to understand what the experience was like for a student. And a bit to Nandor's point, all of that stuff that we do in the background, all the processes, all the paperwork, all the stuff we put our students through. On graduation day, when they're walking out to the world and you successfully graduate as a student, they're not remembering the paperwork or anything that they did. They're remembering the interaction they had with an academic, the support services they had, the person they went to on campus to ask them how to get around, or the online tutorial that, somebody was at the other end of a chat in the middle of the night helping them get through. That's what they remember. So they're the experiences that are outside of that traditional, customer service, how do I navigate around this journey? And I think at universities, it's such a complex place. So there are so many places we know we need to improve, but that technology is going to enable us to do that.
Angela, how do you keep track of the experience people are having?
Well, one of the challenges we face is that experience quite often is bifurcated in the university. There is the experience outside the classroom, and there's the experience inside the classroom. And as marketers, we don't control the experience inside the classroom as much as I would like. It's like the Holy of Holies, and I go in there with dirty shoes half the time. So we're doing great work using voice of customer strategies to track the sentiment of our students. And ultimately, what we want to do is publish a student sentiment barometer on our website that fluctuates with how they're feeling. We ask them questions like, "How do you feel?" Universities don't usually ask that. We ask them what you think, which is different to what you feel. So those moments of truth are activated by the voice of customer strategy, and we're collecting data on that and publishing it and driving performance. But more importantly, what we're doing is we're using voice of customer to actually assess how students are feeling about the academic experience. We ask them often, rate the lecture, and they're not qualified quite often to critique the content, but they can talk to us about how, which is really important for us.
So across the four of you, you'd be using a lot of different technologies to be trying to drive an engaging consumer experience. What are some of the ones you're using at the moment that are really working for you? I'll start with you, David.
Look, we are, and I think they all, and obviously we're at the Adobe Symposium, so we're using some of their technologies, but...
That's the new managing director from BUPA. Congratulations, well done, son.
It's interesting. I think they all contribute different things. CRO has been a great driver of performance. Analytics, which has been around for a while, I think has really matured. And then, using a CMS or, Experience Manager has also had a huge impact. But it's when you tie all these things together, the pieces which, the glue which binds it together is the data. And that's the data which is actually driving a better experience. And there are commercial benefits when you have an improved experience for a customer, but there's also emotional and tangible benefits for the customer as well. And it's balancing those out, which is really important. But the technology is really just the mechanism that gets you there. It really comes back to what Nandor was saying around the emotional experience of was it a holiday? If you can create and curate experiences using that technology, that's what gets you there.
Nandor, you said you've already started to see some encouraging signs from the feedback you're getting and the analysis you're doing. What are the technological wins you're getting? What are the technologies that are really enhancing this experience for your consumers?
Yeah, it was about piggybacking on your comment around data. We do talk a lot about the experience layer, obviously, and this is the conference to talk about that, and that's the first and foremost place where experiences come to life. But I think it's the entire technology stack that is contributing to that, and the underlying data platforms and capabilities are critical. But there's many other parts that need to work together. I think it's a really important question to answer: what technologies are required to create great experiences? And sometimes it feels like we're sort of out there shopping every possible toy that we can to create that experience, rather than really leveraging what we've got and really focusing on bringing that to life for our customers. I might just touch on a couple of other points, which is the emerging channels. We quite often focus on our core assets. For us is the website and the app, and that's where the bulk of our experience are being created. But really thinking outside the box and moving into the physical space. If you think about your airport experience, if you think about your in-flight experience, where you bring the physical world and the digital world together, where there's very new technologies and integrations required, or emerging channels such as messaging platforms or voice interactions. That's where the surprise and delight factor from an experience point of view will kick in.
I think I remember reading, Jen, with your university, you have a significant percentage of students who don't spend much time on campus, yeah? The Sturt offering an experience is quite different.
70% of our students don't come on campus. So we don't have the ability, I guess, to wow people with facilities and, great campus facilities and gyms and lecture theatres and all those things that you can when you have a physical campus. So the majority of interactions we have are actually online, which is why that online experience really needs to be the best it can be. And again, talking to the points that we have, that what we've brought in from the Adobe stack and working with our partners at Accordant has allowed us to personalise that and make it a smoother experience rather than just transactional, which it has been in the past.
Erik asked Nandor a question about trying to make the case for disruptive digital change. If the leaders are hesitant, I might start with you guys at universities, because universities are, and I've done some stuff at the University of Sydney, they're amazing organisations, but they are Byzantine, they are political, they are siloed. There are people who've got their little patch and no one tells them what to do because they've been there since 1850. Are unis particularly ambitious, or are they... I would imagine it's quite hard sometimes to prosecute the case for real disruption in the university sector.
I'll start on this one. Universities have a lot of change antibodies in their system. As much as I introduce viruses almost every day. The reality is that there are two cadences in universities in terms of speed of change. And that's the challenge for us, how we bring the entire organisation together. We've got bits of it that run very quickly, we've got bits of it that just move glacially in terms of time and effort. However, I was fortunate enough I had the opportunity to rebrand the institution a few years ago, and off the back of that I made the case for digital transformation. So we started with the reaffirming and the reforming of our values and mission and brand, and off the back of that I introduced the digital strategy for the university. And the language that I used was the digital spine, and how the digital spine was going to be the backbone, the experience backbone for the institution. And the business case I developed was quite simple. It was bums on seats. And in marketing at the universities, we can attribute costs fairly directly. And I just needed 100 extra students a year to pay for the investment, because the lifetime value of a student for us is about $70,000 in monetary terms, let alone brand equity. So But it is a challenge. I think it is very complex. The politics are Byzantine. But if you align yourself with the leadership and give them the narrative, and they run with it, then it becomes quite a compelling case.
I was talking to a woman once, her name's Baroness Susan Grenfell. She's a British neuroscientist and educator and political machinator in education over there. And she was telling me back when she was the head of one of the colleges at Oxford in the 1980s, she spent 18 months lobbying the head of 2 other colleges to convince them to go 1/3 each in the cost of renting, not buying, renting a fax machine. And she said that was probably the hardest battle of her professional life, was to convince 2 other people to go in 1/3 each on the rental of this weird machine that could spit out paper with writing on it. It can be challenging, Jen. What do you do when you come up against those obstacles? Angelo had a great thing because there was a broader reform going on and he managed to use that as a sort of stalking horse. What are your insights if there's pushback?
I think I would rather deal with my 3 kids in the morning. When you talk about disruption, trying to get 3 children out under 10, eating their breakfast out the door is a lot more appealing than trying to do this at a university because it is complex. And I believe we still have some fax machines, Adam, down some of the hallways. But I think for us, we're about to go through a very similar process to Western Sydney where we're using brand to drive the digital change and using the reason to revisit our brand, go out there and test in market as the catalyst for the change we will have in our digital space. So it's a really exciting time, but it's transformational. It is massive. So we're going to think big, but we're going to start small.
Because in your field, David, in the health insurance in particular, it is radical what's happening now. It's quite standard now, just whatever company with you, get your bill, take a photo, flip that through the app, you guys will work out if I get the money or not, and then it just appears, and that's happened quite recently. Is it a hard sell in your space, or is it just necessity because everyone's doing it?
Good question. Look, it's probably a bit of both. We need to remain competitive with the market. We need to remain competitive with other industries. So, you talk about who your competitors are. Is it Medibank for us, or is it Amazon and Google and what they're going to do in the future? And no one knows. But if you measure yourself against your peers, that's probably not the best way to stay ahead. I think within BUPA, it's been. I've been there a while, and the last few years we've started to really accelerate that pace of change. How we've gotten there has been organic in some instances in terms of bringing technology on, and then some of it has been more sort of enterprise-wide transformation. The challenge, I think, is that anything that's disruptive, the principles still remain the same. So you've got to be solving customer problems. It's got to be commercially viable. And if you can have that dialogue with the right levels of management and they understand that, that's okay. But again, it comes down to what Nandor was talking about, the people. So getting the technology is sort of the first step. Then utilising it and then getting to optimisation and actually getting value out of it actually takes quite a long time. And you've really got to be able to sell that journey. That it's not just we get the technology and we're there. That's just like the first step on the journey. Because
Nandor, at Qantas, I get the impression Alan Joyce is just bang up for disruptive transformation. He wants to put gymnasiums in the cargo holds of planes. He's just mad for radical change, isn't he?
Yeah, look, I think we're in a good environment with our CEO and our leadership team. I think there is a real desire for that. So the resistance to change is not an issue. As I mentioned before, it's probably more the size and scale and complexity and the nature of the business. We fly planes for a living and we don't do digital solutions for a living. And that is still a very important part of that. And in a way, as much as we don't have to maybe do as much selling and convincing in a size and scale like we have, you really need to overdo it to make progress. So even if you have that buy-in, how do you actually realize it in an environment like that? And how do you create the movement across the organization? The other part for us is really to think now not just within the confines of individual business units, but really thinking about this transformation at the group level. So how do we create that buy-in, not just with the individual CEOs, but really at the group level, and how do we create an ecosystem amongst ourselves? So it's almost taking it to the next level.
Nandor said that when you are on that journey of change, when you have to be thinking about customer pain points rather than corporate outcomes. Let's start with the unis and we'll go to health as well. What are your customer pain points? What are the pain points on the experience for a
Yeah. So before we embarked on our digital transformation and partnering with Adobe and their partners, is we did a lot of journey mapping. to identify where the pain points were, and not defined by the bureaucrats in the organisation by when they get an application in, but what were they feeling about their experience. So we put a lot of work in that. They're very important artefacts to develop before you go on a digital journey, I think, to understand your customer in a much more granular way. Enrolment process for us was a huge pain point. There were 20 steps, analogue steps, to go through enrolment. And as you know, Adam, there's natural decay in any system, like entropy. Our job as marketers and leaders is to reduce that decay as much as possible, i.e. optimization. So we looked at the enrolment funnel as the first MVP for the Adobe stack that we invested in. And we reduced the enrolment steps from 20 analog to 4 digital steps. And we saw a rate of retainment that exceeded our expectations. In terms of dollar value in that first year, net was about $5 million. In university land, you just need to move the dial this much in order to generate significant revenue returns to the institution. But more importantly, the experience was so much better than what it was. And word gets out, and people start to compare, and so that does the brand a world of good.
Because I spoke to someone once at the university, they put out offers for courses and then they'll adjust the marks, put out a second round of offers and they'll do the final. And the numbers that unis enrol are crucial. If you over-enrol, you can get penalised. If you under-enrol, that's money. And they said it was like watching these people go, okay, so the second round we've offered it at 70.4. We need between 30 and 35 students. Drop it to 70.15. And he said it was like watching someone landing a 747 with the amount of... getting those things right at universities are more than just little, esoteric exercises. They have gigantic financial implications, don't they, Jen?
Yeah, and I think so. And I think, especially for a university like Charles Sturt University, 1 in 4 of our students are first-in family. So this is a completely different experience for them. So their pain points are going to be very different to somebody who is just a natural thing for them to do to go to university. The other big issue for us, I think, is if we perfect this enrolment process and our admissions process, it's about what's happening in the current student space as well. So from a current student experience, Angelo touched on it before when he said, we don't have control as marketers. I come from a cosmetic and luxury goods background where you control the end-to-end. You know what's going on. We send our students off and then they go into the hands of our academic world. And that can be a very different experience from what we've promised. So pain points along the way can be very significant. And there is attrition, and attrition's a real problem in Australian universities. And one that, all universities are trying to fix, because we all know the common rule: keep a current customer. It's going to cost you a lot less than going out and getting a new one. But the competition's fierce, and the control over the whole customer experience space doesn't sit with one person.
David, it's interesting because when Nandor's customers, a lot of those people are planning the dream holiday or planning the honeymoon or planning the trip of a lifetime. You're often dealing with people whose kid has broken their leg or who are facing surgery they might be quite nervous about. Okay, is there a certain customer mindset that affects the way you've got to go around? You're dealing with people who are often at some of the most stressful moments in their lives. Does that affect the whole process?
Look, it does. One of our customer pain points from a health insurance perspective is navigating an incredibly complex health system between public and private, and understanding that system, what to do when something happens. Insurance by its very nature, you really don't want to be using it because something has generally happened that you haven't planned for. But the reality is the thought process around health insurance is slightly different to, say, general insurance, and there's much more emotion involved in a health insurance episode than potentially a home or car insurance episode. So, our role is really being a guide for those customers. I don't think we've actually nailed that yet. It's an incredibly complex environment, and there's changes coming in next year from a regulatory perspective, which hopefully will solve some of that. But it's a challenge both BUPA and all our competitors also face in the industry, and there's no easy solution to it, but it's something that we're very focused on.
I can remember I was at a lecture at Sydney Uni. This would be in the early 1990s, and there was a guy next to me, and he had a laptop out, and rather than copying down what the lecturer was saying with pen, he was typing it out. And he was literally the only person in a lecture hall of about 300 people, and he's typing away on this laptop, and we just go, this is weird, what's going on? And it turns out, as a little sidebar, he actually then at the end of the course printed out all his notes and was selling them to other students in a law faculty So he got the crap suit out of him by the law faculty. He was sort of basically self-selecting not to be a lawyer. He was an idiot. But these days, you've got that total, the client base you're dealing with, especially the younger end of university, 18 to 21-year-olds, have lived an entire digital life. They would never have written an A4 sheet of paper. Does that affect the sort of experience you are giving them? Does that affect what they demand? And then with all of you, I presume you'd have a lot of an older clientele. Yours would be the full age spectrum. How much does the customer and their life expectations impact the offering that you've got to give?
Absolutely. I mean, we needed to respond to this phenomenon. Unlike Jen's university, we about half our intake is school leaver intake, so significant. You know, we've got 45,000 students, so that's a lot for us. But even the non-school leavers are of a similar generation. They think differently and they act similarly to school leavers. So we've flipped our classroom. We have no more lectures. We've decommissioned lecture theatres. We've turned them into social spaces for our students because it's just an inefficient way. And our demographic is actually not used to engaging with people that way. The challenge for us is how we unify the digital experience and the physical experience. When we talk digital, we tend to think websites and apps. But at the university, we're starting to think about how we unify the physical and the digital as a complete experience strategy. Because students are not differentiating between the two. And in fact, the better the digital experience, the more resilience we get to build around the pressure points that they sometimes feel on campus. The biggest pressure point for us is parking, of course. And the best definition I've heard of a university is a group of disinterested academics who are united by a common gripe about parking. That's the best definition for university I've heard.
David, you've got them from birth till death, which is, I wouldn't go with it as a slogan, but but you'd have teenage clients, you'd have young adults having their first kids, all the way through to people in retirement and the later stages of life. Does that affect the way you structure your experience?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think, also the fact that we've got very different businesses. So you've got dental and you've got aged care and optical, and then you've got health insurance and a number of other businesses. The expectation when they see the blue cube is that they get a similar experience, or there is something that connects these experiences. And so that's something we're very focused on creating. And then also making it seamless for them to transfer from different environments, whether it's from a physical environment to a digital environment. And that's where the tech comes in. So it really enables us to curate those type of experiences and facilitate something that does appear to be seamless from a customer perspective.
Nandor, I was on a Qantas flight just the other day, and the three people behind me were all probably in their 60s, and they were, for the first time in their life, trying to download the Qantas entertainment app. So they got there. Good. But I had a sense of excitement akin to when Einstein probably discovered relativity. They were it blew their minds. It's fascinating that the breadth of your client base and customer base goes from kids who would not think of anything other than, of course I'm going to watch it on my phone, through to people whose minds were blown that you could watch a movie on a phone on a plane. How does that affect the way you curate the experience for your customers?
Yeah, look, it's such a good point, such a challenge, really. You do have to focus on a few core customer segments, although in the world of personalisation, in theory, you want to create a one-on-one interaction with each and every one of them, but you do need to sort of create groups and create experiences for them. And we certainly have a centre of gravity around a lot of corporate travellers, all the demographic, premium leisure travel, whereas our sister brand Jetstar is probably more at the other end of the spectrum. And we certainly think about this in this context of what sort of experiences, what products, what channels we need to facilitate. It actually goes a step further, even if you think about our frontline staff, our fantastic cabin crew, who hopefully many of you have experienced, who deliver such a great, authentic Australian service. But when it comes to using digital platforms, or them understanding our own app and then becoming a promoter of our digital products, it's a real challenge, like we've done frontline training, and some people haven't opened the app because they're not comfortable with it. So it's a real challenge, and we have realised we need to invest in the education of our customers in how to become comfortable with technology and digital.
Nandor made a great point that these days you can't just compare yourself to other airlines or other unis. You have to go across the full breadth, and Angelo reinforced that. So from each of you, when you look around anywhere at a digital experience, who's nailing it? Give me an example of something you have in your personal life or you benchmark against and go, yeah, those, but yeah, they've got it going on? Who are some examples? Or if you want to, you can name some ones that are really... maybe keep those a little bit more anonymous, but no, what's something you look at and go, yeah, I'm impressed by the way they've done that?
I think Qantas are doing a fantastic job. And
Nice work.
but they are, and they're up
You deserve a
here.
promotion too.
I think you might have...
Now I'm the Managing Director of Growth and Performance at Qantas. No, but I think Qantas do a great job, and we fly with them all the time, and just the fact that you can do everything online, it's easy, it's accessible. We're all so short on time, and I don't need anything more challenging in my life. It's challenging enough. So kudos to Qantas. They do a great job.
If you want to catch up with Jen, she'll be in the chairman's lounge next time she flies. Ding, ding. David, Angelo, anyone you've seen?
Yeah, I'll take Chairman's Lounge too, thanks.
I wish I could make it work, actually.
Look, I think it's pretty hard in this room not to, potentially put a foot wrong when talking about brands. But for me, I think about some of the streaming services. If I go to more of a safe place like, entertainment, so Netflix or even ABC, what they've created with those experiences versus what I would have found, the free-to-air version of that experience for me doesn't work. But when I've got control over that, I think where those players are going is really interesting. And then obviously as a marketer, there's a lot of opportunity there as well around media. But, the experiences they're creating have really changed that industry significantly.
Anyone here from Hoyts, the movie? If you hop on your phone, if you try and I live on the Central Coast, and it's Hoyts' Errand Affair is our near one. So you go Hoyts Errand Affair, screening times, and then you go to select, and then you hit a movie, and then they go, which cinema do you want to watch it at? I just said Hoyts Errand Affair. Then you go to it. Good. Would you like to buy a ticket? Boom. At which cinema would you like to buy? I just said Hoyt. And it's such a small thing, and it only probably adds a minute to the total experience, and it drives me up. And so there is this weird thing, isn't there, that in an otherwise, like, it's amazing that on my phone I can book some tickets to a movie while I'm driving, not while I'm driving. But this one little glitch that someone hasn't spotted drives me. I have a disproportionately negative response. Is that something that you have to manage? Like the pain point is so much more painful than it should realistically be for me. Is that something you're constantly have to be aware of in getting these things right?
Absolutely, and universities are just full of these examples. But that's why we attacked the enrolment funnel first when we stood up the Adobe platform and all the other technologies around it to build the case for ongoing investment. So we stood that up in 6 months. It was so complicated, Adam, that I don't think students needed 6 years of schooling to prepare for university. If they got through that, then they could enrol in the university. And those pain points, we're still tackling them because they do damage the brand. And as Jen said, this is a competitive space, higher ed, and students move freely between institutions, so we need to be on the ball.
Mm-hmm. Just quickly, in wrapping this up, I'll go down the line, and I'd like from each of you, what's one killer takeaway? Something you've mentioned, someone else has mentioned, or something you haven't got around to yet that you wanted to contribute. Killer takeaway in creating a great as opposed to good customer experience. I'll start with you, Angela, and I'll work down this way. What's one takeaway for everyone in the room?
For me, the evidence of creating a great experience for our students is to make my colleagues uncomfortable. If I'm doing that, then I know that I'm doing the other bit right.
Nice. Jen?
I think it's about culture. And that's the big takeaway for us. It really is. It's about changing culture, and that's changing the language you're using. It's changing everything, and that is massive because people are a lot harder to change than technology.
David?
For me, I think be bold, be annoyingly persistent in chasing what you know is right. Make sure you take your people with you, and I think be prepared to make mistakes, and you can learn just as much from the mistakes on that journey as you can from the things that you do right.
Nandor, killer takeaway.
Listen to your customers, go out there, ask them what's working for them, what not. Be a customer of your own product, and just read the feedback they're giving you and act on it.
Please give our panel a big round of applause.